Welcome to the Primal Show with your host, Heath Squire, and today's guest back on again for a second round, Dr. Mark Smith, PhD in physiology, and he has a great site, docsmith.org. Thank you for coming on the show again. Today, we're going to be focusing on interval training and also kind of the differences between a paleo vegan and this new diet called Pegan, and kind of how to basically cut through all the confusion and get to the root of the matter, which is really inflammation. And then by following one of these diets, then mixing it with interval training for maximum results. So, Dr. Smith, tell me what your view is on the Pegan diet and kind of what your thoughts are, because it's kind of gotten a lot of attention lately, and I'm very interested to hear from one of the, definitely one of the founders of Paleo. Between you and Cordain, I'm very interested to hear your feedback.
Well, it's not been that long since I've been aware of it. And so the first thing I did was to read Dr. Hyman's article that he wrote, I think, in January of this year. And my first thought, to be honest with you, it's really no different to what I've been doing. He's just put a name to it. And when I say it's no different to what I've been doing, that is in terms of satisfying people's different approaches to eating paleo and the different percentage to how much they follow it. So I think it's kind of a catchy name. It's perhaps a way to appease and bring the communities together a little bit, which I do support very much so. I've often said that there's this antagonism sometimes between vegans or vegetarians and paleo, but I think there's a lot more commonality than disagreement. A very good colleague of mine on the Tireless Performance Institute Nutrition Advisory Board, Don Tolman, if you've ever heard him, I think it's, if you just Google Don Tolman, you can see some of his videos. Brilliant mind, one of the probably most educated historians on the history of food and how it was used in primitive times. When I say that, not necessarily Paleolithic times, but tribes back, post-Paleolithic periods. And just a very fascinating individual. And we first met, I think it was back in something like 2007, where we were on a panel together at the World Gold Fitness Summit. And it was interesting as we were talking. Obviously, I was espousing the paleo ethic, and he focused very much. He sort of recognized, to not shove it in everyone's face, you shouldn't be eating meat. He was like, I choose not to eat meat. And we focused very much on all the commonalities. And then at the last World Gold Fitness Summit last year, we were having a drink at the bar, and I just turned to him and I said, we've got to sometime do something where we kind of make people aware of how much we have in common. And I said, so a lot of people would choose not to eat meat from an ethical perspective. Well, I'm not going to sit and argue that. I can't argue that if that's their position. What we can do is try and argue what the science would show what might be the optimal health. But obviously, his son, he's pretty much disease-free. He's doing well. So obviously, he's succeeding. He's doing okay. Is it optimal? That could be up for debate. But what was important to just sort of get that point across. And I said, look, you pretty much agree with everything I do other than the meat. But would you agree that if people are going to eat meat, would you rather them do what the majority of people are doing by eating feedlot meat, or would you rather them be eating organic, grass-fed, free-range? He goes, well, of course, the latter. I said, well, we're really your closest meat-eating friends, because at least we're doing something that you would argue is at least sort of ethical towards the animals, humane, et cetera, et cetera. So I think in that regard, maybe Dr. Hyman was trying to do a little bit of that, and I think that's commendable, because I think that is important, because it's about getting back to nature, getting away from processing of chemically ridden foods and everything else. So all of that, totally agree with.
Well, yeah, and to your point, though, I think that there's already some confusion right from the get-go on the Pegan diet, because I've seen these blogs pop up, and they're already recommending like honey and things that a vegan couldn't eat. And I think it's important to note that the Pegan would have to be vegan first and follow the paleo rules second, because the primary focus would be no honey, not harming any animals, and then follow the paleo template, which would be no gluten, no grains, no dairy. Right. And I think really the thing that we compromise on would be legumes in general. So you would have, peanuts, and then you would have a limited amount of beans and maybe some organic, tofu for protein or pea protein isolate. Now, we know that those aren't optimal for a paleo crowd, but as a vegan looking to not harm animals, I think those would promote to like optimal health to the nth most degree, for a vegan. And I think that's what we're really talking about is, hey, you're right. We have so much in common with vegans in a way, but really there's just a couple of crucial differences that, being the beans. And, I already saw people trying to add back in grains, which are very inflammatory. But I think, the first and foremost is if you're going to call something Pegan, make sure it's vegan compliant.
Well, there's that. And I think, maybe, he's arguing, everyone should eat this way. I think it might be better said that, Pegan perhaps is a better name to use for vegans trying to improve and optimize a vegan diet. Then I think it might have a better connotation than trying to merge paleo with it necessarily. And well, it is merging paleo, but not trying to get paleo people to eat this way, because I don't think paleo people are not going to reintroduce grains and legumes and dairy. Now, the vegans obviously not going to have the dairy in there, but the beans and legumes, the legumes and the grains are going to be in there. But from an optimal perspective, I think that can be the concern. There is plenty of evidence now, even, and it's, if you go through his article, let's just do that, because I think that might be better.
Sure.
In terms of, I suppose the first thing to say is, he's critical of the sort of observational studies with nutrition, that they can be very flawed, and, okay, agreed. But what he doesn't address is that, with the popularity, with the awareness now of Paleolithic nutrition to the public, obviously that's also going to get in the awareness of researchers. Well, up until 2012, we had 11 experimental studies, whether they be animal, human, or epidemiological. In the last 2 years, we've added 15 experimental studies. So while a lot of people love to say, well, the research on paleo, they're very small numbers and there's not much of it, that argument is becoming less and less. And I was talking to Dr. Cordain not so long ago, and there's some studies coming out now where there's some big numbers, and we'll see what the research shows. But based on the observational studies we see, I know where my money's going to be on where the results will show us. So that's one thing, is that we are now seeing a lot of experimental studies, and the research is overwhelmingly supportive of the Paleolithic template being a very good optimal nutritional template. So that's the first thing I would say. I'm literally going from his article here. Then in terms of, going through what is Pegan, I sort of found it sort of smiling a little bit, because I'm sort of going, well, this sounds very similar to what I do with my clients, that I'm trying to eat a Paleolithic template. And I say it's a template from which to try and do as well as we can. If that's optimal, it might not be realistic for some people, it could be for others. So if we look at that, he addresses one. So what are the characteristics that we all agree on? Very low glycemic load. That's important, all right, because we're going to come back to that based on what you were just talking about. High in vegetables and fruits. Yeah, we all kind of nod our head. Low in pesticides, antibiotics, and hormones. No chemicals. Higher in good quality fats. Adequate protein. Ideally organic, local, and fresh foods. If animal products, they should be sustainably raised or grass-fed, and fish low mercury. So those are kind of the points he goes, we all agree on. And I agree. We all agree on that. All right. So then he comes into the controversy. Dairy, the grains, the beans, the meat are the main things. So, and then he had eggs and fish a little bit. But so if we now look at those, he says, for example, the fact of the matter is, grains are inflammatory, all right? I actually, for the first time recently, only watched Fathead, which I thought was a very well done movie.
Exactly.
The guy just sort of jumped into that with probably very little knowledge. I think his knowledge is very different today from when he first started that.
Oh, yeah.
But, that it's an interesting one, and there's plenty of research showing that, grains are certainly not optimal if we looked at the lectins. And, of course, the conflict of interest is point that we all agree on is low glycemic load, and yet now we're going to grains, which are, generally speaking, yes, so the whole grains have a lower glycemic load than the refined grains, but relative to fruits and vegetables, no, they're not low glycemic. So that's a problem.
It's off the chart, and they usually recommend quinoa and stuff like that, which is extremely, high on the glycemic index. And
compared to what, right? They're saying it's low compared to the really bad grains, so it's better. It's a pseudo grain. But compared to a Paleolithic diet, it's going to be very high glycemic load. So there's a conflict when he says stay low glycemic and now introduce grains, and the same can be said for beans.
Right.
The other problem is beans are a great source of fiber, protein, and minerals. Well, the middle one, protein, I would disagree with that.
Not a lot of
it's, it's about, the FDA, they lump beans in with animal protein as an equal source of protein, and that simply the science doesn't support that. It's the content of protein in beans is about 40% of animal protein, but that doesn't address the bioavailability with the phytate tissue, et cetera, et cetera. So when you actually look at the bioavailability of protein in beans, we're down to about 20%. So to compare it and say it's a good source of protein, I also think is disingenuous. It's not. Can it, from a survival perspective, can you get by on it? Can you do okay? Could you be disease-free? Yeah, but is it optimal? I would argue no. The meat, obviously, I think is, we all agree it should be organic, free range, which is what he's promoting, but obviously to a vegan crowd that's not going to eat the meat, he can't have that in there.
And to that point right there, that's already confusion. Because hey, look, if you're going to have eggs, which are vegetarian, but then all of a sudden you're recommending lean meats as part of Pegan, well, you might as well be paleo at that point. And so, but I could see Pegan being a great diet for those that are not going to eat animal protein, of any kind. And that's where I think he should really try to hone in. It's like, hey, look, paleo is great, which I know he's a paleo advocate in and of himself, but also just making Pegan a pure form for vegan people looking to have optimal health. And then you really try to hone in is like, okay, well, is organic, GMO-free tofu okay? And if you are going to consume it, these are some things you should know about it. Is, are peanuts okay? Maybe focus more on other nuts, that could give you some more protein. Legumes, if they're prepared properly. Maybe, white rice as a great source to, give you the carbs you need after an intense workout loaded at the...
Well, I think, I would probably, before rice, I would probably go with some of the tubers that we would, say sweet potatoes. Obviously, potatoes are very high glycemic load, and a lot of the anti-nutrients, they're a little better in the sweet potatoes. Not paleo, even though a lot of paleo people will put them in, not true paleo, but certainly, in sort of moderate consumption, and I think the same can be true then for a Pegan. So I agree with you. I think it's actually probably a better term to use for vegans wanting to optimize vegan nutrition.
And, I hope to have him on hopefully in the next month or so. And this is some stuff I'm going to be discussing with him because it's really important if he is going to, really spearhead that movement is to really separate the two. Because I think, as a paleo food manufacturer, at Julian Bakery, we really try to appeal to all crowds. And some of our products are paleo and vegan, and we actually put vegan right on the front of our packaging. Right. But I think people they need a diet that they can follow without, somebody inserting, hey, put in meats and stuff like that. I think it's polluting what could be a great diet for vegans. And vegans it's a way more popular diet than paleo is right now. That could be changing in the future, but in general, there is a bigger vegan following, based on what I've seen in the marketplace. And what's interesting is vegans have such a lock on the grocery industry, and it's interesting pushing a paleo product into grocery stores where a lot of the buyers are vegans. And I think it's the sheer fact that we actually promote vegan on our packaging that we get into these placement deals. But if we didn't have that, I think a lot of us would just be shunned. But I mean, the sheer popularity of paleo is really the driving force also because they know paleo sales. I think we were on the forefront of that with paleo bread. And after they took a look at the sales of the bread and then took a look at the price point, they stopped worrying about the price point and just focused on the sales, and they just started widely accepting it. But that being said, I'm looking forward to actually making some Pegan products. We already have some in development. And as a food manufacturer, I guess I'd like to talk to you about your thoughts on pea protein and what if you have any sort of information on that. And then I don't think I'll be formulating anything with tofu because as a guy, I just really feel that it sets us up to be over-estrogenized and to possibly gain weight. But that being said, a Pegan diet is so balanced, I don't even know if that would necessarily happen because you're avoiding so many other things. I'm really mixed on the organic tofu thing, but the pea protein and the peanuts, I'm more interested in developing along those lines. What are your thoughts about that?
Actually, before we go on to that, what I wanted to finish on the
Sure.
vegan thing, because you'd asked me to sort of look at it. After this article went through all of the agreements and disagreements, he's like, so what does it look like? And I think that should be addressed. Because when I read it, I'm like, well, wait a minute. That is exactly what my diet recommending Paleolithic as an 80-15-5 approach. I think on the last time I was on, I said this, but just to clarify, I try and get people to follow 80% Paleolithic principle, 15% non-processed, non-paleo, so that would include some grains, some legumes, and some dairy, if by choice, if they wanted to. Right. And then 5% would be, the bad processed foods for fun and if they wanted it. So then when we read what does it look like, focus on the glycemic low. All right, well, obviously if you're 80% paleo, that's going to be a low glycemic diet right off the get-go. Eat the right fats. Well, we're doing that with that approach. All right, then he says, eat mostly plants. I tell all of my clients, eat as many vegetables as you can. All right. Focus on nuts and seeds. They say, yep, they're great snacks. I'm agreeing with that. Avoid dairy, he says. All right. Avoid gluten. All right. He says, eat gluten whole grain sparingly. Well, that's what I say by saying it's in the 15% category. It's not in the 80%. So he's really agreeing with me there. Next point, eat beans sparingly. Again, that's what I say. It goes into the 15%. Eat meat or animal products as a condiment. I would disagree with that. I think people should eat what their body is telling them to eat. If they feel they need to eat a pound of salmon versus half a pound, eat it. There's a lot to be said for that. So other than that, and then think of sugar as an occasional treat. Well, that's in my 5%. So his outline there to me is sort of a paleo template-based diet. So I really think what needs to happen here is he focused the term Pegan on improving or optimizing a vegan diet for health. I think that's where that term should go. Yeah. And not try and take paleo people into eating Pegan. Because I think, the success of the paleo diet has been because of its success, right? It's grown in leaps and bounds because it works. Diets don't, I couldn't care less what the research is saying to a certain extent. I mean, I do. I should clarify that. But, usually research follows what goes on in the field. Yeah. All right? If no one was seeing success with the Paleolithic diet and people were like trying it and it didn't work, they'd drop it. No researchers would be looking at it. It would be dead and gone. But that's far from the case. So people are seeing so much success. I don't think trying to pull people away from something that is successful for them needs to be done. I think the only thing that he might be trying to argue there is it's better for the planet. And again, if we address there the work of Alan Savory, if you go and listen to Alan Savory's TED lecture, that might be something for consideration. I've read some articles critical of it, but it's certainly eye-opening that this idea that we can't feed the planet with the population we have using animal protein, I think is a misguided and not yet supported statement.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very good point and something to be definitely highlighted because I think we can. It just needs to be done. I think the research needs to be there, and I think it's coming out. To your point, so in that article, I mean, I get really stuck when people recommend a little bit of grains, even if it's paleo or vegan, either way, because we know they're so inflammatory. Even in small moderation, we know that consuming just a little bit of gluten stays in your system for so long. And whether you're a celiac or not, we now know about autoimmune triggers just from consuming a little bit of gluten. And I'm actually in that category. I'm not a celiac. I'm wheat intolerant. when my body consumes just a little bit of gluten, I actually get extremely tired, and I kind of shut down, and to the point where I have to go take a nap. And since I don't consume gluten anymore, my energy levels are great all day because I'm not having that autoimmune trigger. I think it's better just to avoid altogether. I had another gentleman named Kevin Geary on the show from Rebooted Body, and he was saying that, we shouldn't demonize certain foods. And I was like, no, we should absolutely demonize certain foods because of the damage they cause. I think being tough on certain, avoiding certain ingredients is okay, because there's so many other things we can consume. So,
well, listen, let me clarify. When I'm trying to get people that are eating the standard American diet to improve their diet. So my goal is the 80-15-5 approach, right? I think that's very realistic. Now, once people get to there, I try and improve it even more. But I do think that I often have said this approach. It's like you could make the argument in certain people, you might be, when you talk about gluten, for example, that you don't have celiac disease, but you have a sensitivity to it, and there can be all sorts of things. And I think one of the best ways for people to discover this is, to be very strict for a period of time, then reintroduce foods to see if they notice a difference. Are they more tired, lethargic? Do they have aches and pains? Do they get migraines? There could be all sorts of things. Our bodies are so complex, and certainly at the molecular level, your what we call the haplotype of your MHC complex protein, that's the molecule that grabs the antigen, the protein, the sequence in the body, in the blood, and presents it to the immune system. We all have different haplotypes, and a lot of that is from your genetics of where you're from, and that can change things. So there are going to be some people that can handle gluten without a negative effect up to perhaps a certain amount of a volume. So it's going to be very individual, I think. So I'm not saying, yes, it's okay for everyone. What I'm saying is there's going to be some individual discovery with that. Is there any need to do it? No, absolutely not. There's no benefit to it. Although sometimes I wrote an article for the Paleo Diet, the last one I did. It's been a while. I owe them one. It was just kind of my experience over the years. And I said, one thing I've often said is that, the body is building and reproducing cells, millions a day, and it's going all the time. Well, I think the body's quite clever. It knows what to use. If the right thing is there, it's going to use it. So if you have enough of the right stuff, it'll build it, right? So then the negatives kind of get thrown away. It's not used, and it can be, toxins looked at as toxins thrown away. I've had a concept, no real research to suggest it, but you could almost argue that the odd lectin, for example, that might be a negative in small quantities could actually keep the immune system strong by challenging it. It's a thought process that's kind of interesting. But again, that would be very individual, person to person. So those that, your experience is, no, gluten is not for me, and I'm going to go, then avoid it.
Yeah, and I think to your point is getting in there with an elimination diet and figuring out, seeing how great you feel after eliminating everything, going like strict paleo, and then starting to reintroduce it. It's the best way. I did it myself, and immediately that's when I found out, as soon as I did consume even the smallest amount, like, one slice of bread that had gluten in it, I immediately noticed this autoimmune issue, which ended up causing extreme tiredness, to the point where I had to take a nap. So
if people are looking to do that, when we talk about being strict, you've got to be really strict.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you've got to, because at the molecular level, I may have shared this story last time, and I've had quite a lot of experience working with autoimmune patients, and this is when I was actually back at Colorado State with Lauren, when we were doing kind of the postdoc and meeting every week, and there was quite a few autoimmune patients that had heard from some of the lectures, and we were contacted by her, and I was the one assigned to kind of go and chat to her and explain how she could get on the Paleolithic diet. And so she did that with huge improvements. And one of the things we had looked at, the research, DHA being an important potential nutrient in helping regeneration of the myelin sheath. She went out and bought DHA at the local health food store, and they had darkened the gelatin capsule with carob, which is a bean extract. We'd already established in her, when she was reintroducing foods, that she loved green beans. and they were a big no-no. As soon as she reintroduced those, she had all sorts of problems. She could feel the tingling coming back, and so it was like, okay, whoops. So she took like 2 pills. So the amount of the lectin in that carob would have been very, very small, but it was enough to set her immune system off. And we shouldn't be surprised by that when we look at, anaphylactic shock with kids with peanuts, for example. So when people are looking to eliminate, we mean eliminate. Be very, very strict. And the other thing, of course, that then would be important is don't reintroduce 3 or 4 things at a time. You've got to reintroduce one thing at a time so you can identify and really see if that one thing has made a difference or not.
Yeah, I heavily promote that. I mean, it's definitely the way I found the template that I have now that I follow, where I don't have to really think about weight or gaining weight anymore. The weight dropped, and now I get excellent results when I work out. My hormones have balanced. I do take some supplements, but that's because as I approach 40, my testosterone levels are changing, and I found some great natural supplements to promote that. But that being said, I definitely, elimination diet, there's different degrees, like you mentioned, but there's a way just to follow a paleo diet that includes so many wonderful things like nuts and avocados, limited amounts of fruits. Don't overdo it on fruits. Don't overdo it on honey or maple syrup, very limited amounts on those. But there's a way to do it where you have such a great menu and things to choose from. It's really unlimited. And I think, to your point, a lot of the vegans get in there and they harp on the paleo diet, and they're like, well, consuming meat, with all the antibiotics, and they start talking about it like as if we were consuming like this low-grade beef, or these cattle that were not properly treated, and that's not the case. When I go and shop, it's grass-fed, organic. I actually get the leaner cut because I don't overconsume fat. It's not necessary, and it adds a ton of way more calories than I need to take in. But just go with a sirloin or a lean steak, a filet mignon if you can, or fish. I mean, there's so many great things to choose from. And to that point, though, I wanted to get back to what you think of organic tofu. Like, so if you were a vegan, Mark, not that you are, but if you were, what are your thoughts based on your knowledge on organic tofu, peanuts, and pea protein specifically? Do you think that they would set up a person that obviously doesn't have an autoimmune issue for optimal health if you were not, a vegan and not looking to harm any animals?
Yeah, if it's from the ethical perspective, obviously you have to go that way. I mean, obviously, I think from a protein source, we've talked about it. I love some of the protein powders that are being made from beef now, grass-fed beef. But obviously, if it's an ethical issue and you're going to that, I think you're going to try to get them as clean as you can. And you probably know more about it than me, being in the food processing industry, is can we kind of clean up the protein from a lectin perspective, perhaps, and improve the protein content of these powders. If that's the case, that would improve it. And we could probably change the glycemic load a little bit. I mean, one of the approaches as well to sometimes do it, if we even go cleaner, you just go to the amino acids. I've worked with people that have been vegan, and they won't take anything, but it's like, would you take amino acids? And it's like, well, yeah, I'll do that because it's just, where do they come from almost doesn't matter. They're just the amino acids,
That's an interesting point because they're from whey, so, most of them are derived from dairy. So I didn't think about that, though. Yeah, that's something that I've actually really been doing myself.
But because of the amino acids, they're then going to be free from the growth factors. So one of the biggest, if you look at, those that are the high-fat, low-carb world, obviously they're going to be doing quite a bit of dairy and cheese. The high-fat, the issue that I have is not fat per se. It's more the growth factors that are in there that are not natural for humans. If it were, we would still be suckling from our mothers, and we wouldn't be doing it from another animal. So I don't think it's a natural product for us from the growth factor perspective. But you get to the amino acid, it's purified. That's going to be, I think, received differently for the body. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, the other aspect is, can you get plant derived when I say plant, I don't mean legumes. I mean vegetable-derived protein, and concentrate that for protein sources. That's what I would probably migrate towards if I were a vegan.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I haven't seen anything yet, but I think really the bridge and what I'm planning on launching within the next couple of months is a Pegan protein. I actually bought peganprotein.com. and it's actually...
How many domain names do you own now?
Oh,
you probably own about 1,000.
Hundreds, right? Yeah. Not thousands, not yet. But I felt it was important because I found something that could really be both a protein that is both paleo and vegan at the same time. And it's the only one, period, that actually qualifies as a true Pegan protein. And it's Sacha inchi. It's a Brazilian nut that is 60% protein, and it's packed with omega-3 and 6, which is great for testosterone boosting, anti-inflammation. So I think it's really a solution for people that are on a Pegan diet that want to consume a protein that is probably the best choice of all proteins.
You held back on that when you started the questioning. You didn't tell me that was an option. I like that. Well, a question I would have on that then is are you purifying the protein? Are you separating out the fat and the protein, or are you just blending the whole thing?
No, it's actually raw. It's raw, organic. It's going to be raw, organic protein that is it's basically just that. I tend to use...
What's the macronutrient breakdown of it?
It's 60% protein and extremely high in fat and omega-3 and 6. So.
60% protein is a nut.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
that's going to be the highest protein nut on the planet, yeah?
It is. And we're actually making it into a Pegan bar. So it'll be the first ever crossover bar on the market also. And it tastes very nutty. It's delicious. And I think it's a real solution for people that are looking to avoid tofu. I'm kind of on the fence about the pea protein. I actually, before I started paleo, I did consume pea protein. I just had gotten better results with egg or beef protein. But I actually, pea protein was definitely my third choice. I didn't really notice any sort of inflammation. I digested it really well. I can actually, I really despise the taste of pea protein. So for me, I worked hard at blending it out in the flavor we're launching. But I think this new Sacha inchi nut is really an eye-opener, and it's going to be great to formulate with. I'm very excited to launch it. So.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. Is its availability going to be good in terms of plenty of options?
Not an issue.
Not an issue.
Yeah.
Unless it becomes so popular, who knows? But that sounds really good. I like that. I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
So if I was a vegan, I'm migrating towards that.
Exactly. And I think I'm really looking forward to Dr. Mark Hyman to really try to separate the two and not try to pull paleo so much into this Pegan thing, whereas it should really be promoting optimal health, like you said, for vegans. And then also giving them some crossover, proteins like this, Sacha inchi. So
yeah, well, that's the main issue is Don Tolman is an interesting fella because he does a lot of fasting, and I'm pretty sure that guy could survive just on vegetables and fruit and water. He's done some interesting stuff. So then it's like, for me, it's like the best vegan diet would be to limit as much as possible the legumes and the grains, because they're not optimal nutrition. They can be inflammatory. Can you survive on it? Yes, but I don't think it's optimal. So I think foods that can provide a better protein profile would be good. And this sounds as though you may have found something that would be very, very popular. And it would be interesting to get the feedback from vegans if they started substituting that in place of, at 60% protein, they could be pretty much doing away with the legumes and the grains, and also then satisfying Dr. Hyman's request, as is our request, for the food to be in the diet overall to be low glycemic.
Exactly. Yeah, it's extremely low carb, which is great. So I've been asked for so long because everybody's like loves paleo, but for the vegans, it's like, they can't do it, and it's like, okay, well, where do you get the protein? And it really comes down to protein when you look at it, and really, it's tofu. You have nuts, and you have peanuts, legumes.
Nuts, most nuts are not a great source of protein. It's a great source of fat, healthy fats. I mean, it's about 10% protein. Yeah. So I'm sort of intrigued. I've never heard of it. I've learned something today, and I'm going to be Googling it.
Maybe something for the Paleo Diet website, because I think it's a real interesting nut, and it's just got so many health benefits. So something definitely to check out. Now, we talked a little bit about how all this plays into interval training, and I mean, from a high level perspective, I really think that consuming this sort of template, and especially avoiding the gluten, grains, and legumes if at all possible, and either a Pegan or vegan or paleo diet done properly, mixed with interval training. Actually, I should take out the vegan, so it would be Pegan or paleo, not vegan, but mixed with interval training. And the reason we're going to talk about this is because Pegan and paleo both are anti-inflammatory in nature, especially if you're eliminating the grains. And that's what we're really, at the end of the day, is you're able to have these extreme workouts with less joint pain. You're going to be able to work out harder and recover faster by consuming this kind of diet. Tell us a little bit about some of the results you've gotten with interval training and your clients, and just maybe the getting results faster through eating in this style.
Well, obviously, optimal nutrition is going to help no matter what kind of training you're going to do. The better the nutrition, the better you're going to do. So I think that sort of irrespective of the diet, you can see good results with the right type of interval training. It's just going to be maximized if the diet is better. So we don't need to really combine the two. We can kind of talk just about the interval training. So the first thing is I think most people, their perception, their knowledge of, and experience of interval training is a little different when they sort of meet me, because I lecture for the Tyler's Performance Institute, and all of the protocols we use there. So we've lectured to thousands and thousands of healthcare professionals now, and a lot of them come in with their version of interval training, and then they kind of meet my version of interval training. So first of all, let's just clarify what I would define as high-intensity interval training versus sprint interval training or supramaximal interval training. Okay? So high-intensity interval training could primarily be anything that is high intensity, you recover low intensity, you go high intensity, low, high, low. So that's interval training, right? You're doing higher intensity in intervals. Well, the intensity component can vary, obviously, significantly. If it's an intensity that you are going that you didn't even need the break, then it's an absolute waste of time, right? if you could have just keep going, it's not really interval training. You're just stopping from an endurance piece of work. But let's say and something that most people don't understand is when people talk about VO2 max, and they talk about a work output of 100% VO2 max. That power output is determined when someone does a graded exercise test. So whether it's looking at heart function as you get older in a doctor's office, or whether you're in a laboratory and you're younger and you're looking at performance training and see which is the best protocol, and we want to say, well, who improves the cardiovascular capacity or VO2 max the most? So you go on a treadmill, let's say you're on the flat at 5 miles per hour, and you just gradually, every couple of minutes, you increase the gradient. So you're increasing the intensity over time. And what you see is an increase in the amount of oxygen the body utilizes up to a maximal plateau. It eventually plateaus. We don't have an unlimited number, and that number is going to vary person to person. But as that plateaus off, that is our VO2 max. Well, the workload, which is going to be a function in this case of the speed and the gradient, is the workload of 100% VO2 max. So we call that a power output of 100%. Okay? People think that's a maximal effort. It's not anywhere near a maximal effort. If I start people at their graded exercise test maximum, and I say, give me 60 seconds, which is kind of the longest someone could sprint for, it's going to be like, that was easy. They'll say, I don't know, it was like a 7 out of 10 effort, 6 out of 10, not that hard. And the reality is humans are capable of more like 250% VO2 max power output, okay? So a lot higher. So using 100% or slightly above, let's say from 100% to maybe 150 is an appropriate intensity for high-intensity interval training. So people go, yeah, I go hard for a minute, easy for a minute, hard for a minute, easy for a minute. So hard is sort of hard, the 100 to 150%. But if I took any human being and I determine 250%, and I say, okay, we're going to go for 60 seconds, they may or might not even make that 60 seconds. There's not a human on the planet that could then come back with only a minute's recovery and repeat that, right? Common sense would tell you that. So what is the time frame that you need following a super maximal effort? Well, research shows it's a minimum of 4 minutes to get even close to reproducing. You know, I think if someone were able to do 250% for 60 seconds, 4 minutes recovery, not many people could reproduce 250, but they might do 240, and then, you know, and so on. So you generally would come down a little bit. So I often tell people, you know, even a half hour or an hour. So you can implement this approach throughout your day. If you had access to a hill or some stairs, you could go as hard as you could for a minute and then do nothing for an hour or so. And believe it or not, your metabolism at the hormonal level can be elevated for sometimes, you know, multiple hours. Not so much what we call EPOC, the excess post-oxygen consumption, excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, or what used to be called VO2, oxygen debt, I should say. That's the oxygen you're utilizing after the activity, and it's primarily there to replenish energy stores that you've utilized during that activity time frame. And it's very dependent upon how much lactic acid is produced. Well, the higher the intensity, the more lactic acid is produced. So anyway, so it's kind of come back full circle. So what I have found and what the research really supports is that intensity is what really causes change for the better, all right? So the more you can push your intensity, the better you're going to see results. So what people need to tend to do is stop doing, like I wrote an article actually, if they go to offthemark.org and scroll down, it's on the paleodiet.com, but I wrote a piece about how people misinterpret the Tabata protocol. You hear it all over the place, I'm doing Tabatas, and that's a protocol that was developed by a Japanese ice skating coach, and it's appropriate for the event that he did, and that was at 170% VO2 max for 20 seconds with a 10-second recovery doing 7 to 8 reps. So people have suddenly, I don't know how it happened, but it became this gold standard in CrossFit and everywhere else, and everyone's doing this, and they think they're just doing it incorrectly, and I talk about that in the article. If you do it, so some people are doing it at really low intensities for an hour class. Well, that's not the Tabata protocol at all. Others are going as hard as they can on each 20-second piece. Well, if they do that, once they've done 3 of them and they've reached 60 seconds, the rest are pretty much a waste of time. Because if I take any human being and accumulate, whether in short bouts or a full 60 seconds, once you hit 60 seconds, the power output drops off precipitously in any human being. You can just try it yourself. Yep. So once you've gone past 3, I'd argue you're kind of wasting your time. And so take a 4-minute recovery and then do 3 more 20s if you want to do that. What I do with my super maximal training is 60 seconds all out with a 4-minute recovery. This is with clients in a workout. Or I'll do 2 30s with a 15 or 30-second recovery between each one. So I've accumulated 60 seconds. Or I'll do 4 15s, I'll do 3 20s, or I'll do 6 10s is another one. 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off. And you can play around with that, what I call mini intervals to accumulate 60 seconds with either a 50% recovery, so half the time of the workout. So if it's a 10-second sprint, 5 seconds recovery, or a 10 seconds recovery. So you can play around with that. But once you've hit that 60-second mark, a minimum of 4 minutes before you do it again. Huh. Now, what works out very well for people, you hear the people that go to the gym, they do their weights, then they go and do their cardio. How about going and starting the workout with a super maximal piece? Your metabolism's jacked. Even some yoga, gentle stretching stuff seems challenging when your metabolism's up. Halfway through your workout, you hit another one. Maybe it's on a different piece of equipment. Maybe it's on a rowing machine or an upright stationary bike. On an upright stationary bike, because it's not paced like a treadmill is, it's you going all out. 1 minute is too long. I defy anyone to try and go for the minute. 30 seconds is plenty when they're using very high resistance. Then carry on with their workout, and then maybe finish with a piece. And they'll see much better results for that by doing the super maximal than just high intensity interval training. And it requires less time. You do a lot less of it.
That's pretty cool. I haven't trained in that way yet. I know a lot of people are getting awesome results, so that's definitely something I'm interested in trying. I kind of take more of a circuit training approach. Actually, because my goal is to be leaner instead of bulking up, I tend to run in between.
Don't get mistaken here, right? You get very lean with this approach.
No, I know. In fact, there's quite a few sites where I was like, wow, they're only working out for that little, and they're getting these amazing results. So I'm definitely a believer in it. I haven't implemented it yet, so I'm actually excited to try out what you're mentioning here.
Well, here's a challenge for all the viewers then, because one of the things I've been lecturing on the high intensity interval training for a very long time. One of the things I would say to try and get people to think through the dogma of long, slow cardio is the way to lose fat and everything else. First thing is have you ever seen a fat sprinter? No. So let's start moving towards how sprinters train. And I just say, look, intuitively you all get that you don't need a lot of time to see improvements if the intensity is there. So I also say to people, all right, imagine, I've got a big room of people, and I say, imagine you came to a stadium stairs, and I'm going to blow a whistle, and I'm asking all of you to go up as many stairs as you can, and I've got an Olympic-level athlete with me, and he can't get to the top, so we've got plenty of stairs. You're not going to run out of them. In 60 seconds, go, do as many as you can. All right, and I just sort of have them close their eyes, and I say, I want you to imagine what that feels like. Some of you will be walking, some of you will be sprinting at the beginning, but all of you, relatively speaking, are going at about the same intensity if it's all you've got. And I said, with about 15 seconds, you're all realizing this is pretty tough. At 30 seconds, it's really tough. At 45 seconds, you hate me, and your muscles are starting to slow down. You're getting that lactic acid inhibition, and you're starting to really feel, burning in the lungs. And at 60 seconds, you stop, and everyone's like, you can hardly catch your breath. And I say, so do you think that has more of a training effect on your body, even though it was only a minute, versus going for a jog or a walk for an hour? Which one do you think is challenging you more? And people intuitively go, well, the intense one. Okay, I said, right. Now, for a lot of you, that was very alarming to the body. You haven't done this, so I'm going to give you a break. We're not going to do another one.
Right.
We're going to go home, all right? And your body's going to notice that you did that night. You probably have some stiffness, some delayed onset muscle fatigue, and so we're going to rest the next day. And then we're going to come back the day after, and we're going to do it again. And we're going to keep doing this every other day for 30 days, all right? For 30 times, all right? So we're basically going to do it for 2 months, all right? So that, every other day, 2 months, you'll have done 30 of them. And I say, so ask yourself this question. On the 30th one, 2 months later, do you think you'll do more steps than you did on day one? And I was like, well, of course I will. Okay. So by definition, your work output has got higher, you become higher. So you are by definition fitter, and you've established that in 3.5 minutes per week. All right? So here's the challenge to everyone. I've been saying this, but we've never actually put that into protocol. So I'm pretty fit, but not as fit as that I've ever been in my life. I think I could be. I'm not in a professional mode. I was playing top-level rugby. That was probably when I was my fittest, but still pretty fit.
Sure.
But as an example of where my fitness level was compared to perhaps it had been, at a 15% grade on a treadmill, I think the best I've run for 60 seconds is 9 miles per hour. Okay? That's pretty challenging, all right? So I, on purpose, really kind of detrained, did as little as I could possibly do. I mean, obviously, I'm a conditioning coach, so I'm in the gym, I'm doing stuff, demonstrating, so I'm not sedentary by any means, but I'd really kind of no official sort of training. And I wanted to see what is a maximal effort. There's something called the Borg scale of perceived exertion, and it goes from sort of 6 to 20. 20 is maximal, and when I say maximal, if I don't grab the handles of the treadmill, I'm off the back of the treadmill. 19 is defined as extremely hard, 17 is very hard, 15 is hard. I'm looking for people to be around the 19 to 20, all right? Extremely hard or maximal. You shouldn't have more than 1 or 2 steps left in you. Now, you don't have to do that right off the get-go. you're building to that, all right? But it definitely wants to be at the 17, 18, 19, 20, up there. So I was probably around an extremely hard, it wasn't maximum, but it was hard enough, at 7 miles per hour, okay?
Yeah.
So at 7 miles per hour, I've got the sheet here, I'm running 187 meters up a 15% grade, all right, for 60 seconds. So that was day one. That's all I did. I did nothing the next day. Day two, I went to 7.1 miles per hour, which is an increase of 2.68 meters. I'm now running 190.44. And it felt the same. All right, so just adding 2.68 meters was that hard again, right? I'm still always close to that maximum. And I continued this, all right? At 7.8, actually, I went from 7.7 to 7.8, and I didn't make the 60 seconds. So I'm at the real maximum. So I actually went down a few meters. I dropped like 5 meters. Then I managed to succeed. Then I went to 7.9, to 8, to 8.1, and I kept going. So basically, I just, out of the experiment, stopped, and I might do this again and continue to see how far I go. But just kind of to make a point, in doing 19 sprints over the course of a little over a month, I improved by 32 meters, exercising an average of 3.5 minutes per week. So for basically a total of 14, well, in this case, 19 minutes, I should say, I've managed to improve a 60-second sprint up a grade by 32 meters.
Wow.
That's a pretty significant increase. And I'm not saying that's what you do as your fitness. I'm just proving a point that if it's maximal effort, your body can see improvements in as little as that. Yeah. So what's the optimal amount? I would say about 12 minutes per week is probably about an optimal amount. So if you're doing this approach, doing, say, 4 of them with a 4-minute recovery on, say, a Monday, Wednesday, Friday would be a really good protocol to do. Or you can have, some people will do it if they just do every other day for 2 weeks. So it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and then they're back to the Monday 2 weeks later. Works really, really well. And so I've challenged people to try that. You'll be amazed how much that improves you. Better than your traditional high-intensity interval training.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, no, it's interesting to hear you talk about that. I actually don't know that much about that. But other than the fact that I'd be interested in mixing what you're doing there with beta-alanine, which is something I've been trying lately, it actually removes lactic acid, so you may be able to even go further and longer. It kind of makes you a little bit tingly, but it's an amino acid that has helped me train actually harder and longer because you don't feel the lactic acid buildup. It actually buffers it. So it's something interesting.
We'll chat offline. Maybe I'll repeat this because I kind of went through a bit of detraining again because I was going to tweak something, and maybe the tweak will be we'll try it with beta-alanine.
It's something interesting. But thank you so much for coming on. I think this was awesome and definitely eye-opening for a lot of people to understand the different diets and also interval training because it's something that people can do to get great results, and especially imagine combining both, for optimal health. I think it's really the key here. So thank you so much for coming on. Everybody, make sure you go to docsmith.org and also the Paleo Diet. Mark's written many different articles on the paleodiet.com site, but docsmith.org. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with all the greatest videos we're launching. We have so many great guests coming on, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
All right, bye.